The racial wealth gap measures the difference between what one owns and what they owe. For Black and brown people in America, particularly Black Americans, the racial wealth gap is 10 to 1 relative to white Americans. Roughly 171,000 in net worth for white American households versus 17,000 for Black households. It's entrenched into so many systems that determine whether someone can climb the economic ladder.
The racial wealth gap is an important element of just social injustice and systemic racism that exists in our country. How can we expect this country to come together if anyone is being left out? I think the events of last June unleashed this torrent of emotion inside and outside of our company. And we felt strongly that we needed to be part of the fight to address these systemic issues of racism and social injustice. I spent a ton of time talking with Black employees, Black leaders inside PayPal, but very importantly, community leaders and Black leaders across the country. And they really opened my eyes to what the real need was and the need for this to be a movement over time and not just a moment in time. We felt like we could start to think about how could we create generational wealth that could be passed on and on and on. And that's where we said, like, we've got to do way more than a couple of $1 million. We've got to make a commitment that thinks about things both in the short term, because there are some real needs and pressing needs from Black-owned small businesses that were going out of business in droves, but also to think about how do we think about the medium term and the long term as well. And that was really the genesis of the program.
More than 40% of Black businesses shut down permanently during the crisis, compared to 17% of white businesses.
COVID struck us. We had to make that tough decision to shut the studio down. We not only were stopping our business income, but we know we would be also stopping the income of other creatives that still needed to create to continue to put food on their tables.
COVID-19 as a small business owner was cataclysmic. Very easily said. I mean, it's like turn the lights off and you sit in the darkness and panic.
The Federal Reserve documented that Black businesses are twice as likely to get turned down for a loan than white businesses. We saw this during the pandemic when so many Black and brown businesses, particularly mom and pop businesses, were not able to get financing.
These were $15 million of grants. They weren't loans, they were outright grants to these small businesses. And the really encouraging part is here we are a year later, and over 90% of those Black-owned small businesses that we gave grants to are still around and thriving today.
The grant for me did a lot. I mean, it allowed us to, get caught up on some rent. It allowed us to keep our payroll going. I mean, it just gave also just that peace of mind of knowing that the work that we're doing here is not going unnoticed.
Soon as I heard about the grant, the first thing came to mind is pie press machine. We had to just make sure we kept that going, and it was like a godsend.
These are businesses that are just starved of capital. They can't get the necessary funds to grow their businesses. And when you can give them that capital, what we've seen time and time again is that their businesses tend to take off. Small businesses are the lifeblood of neighborhoods and communities. And when their businesses take off, they start to hire more. They start to spend more because they have more sales. And that just starts this cycle, positive cycle, of being able to bring up communities, start to create generational wealth.
Less than 2% of all venture capital funding actually goes into entrepreneurs of color, and even less goes into women of color. Women have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Right now, venture capital funding into all female founding teams is at a 3-year low. The reason why a lot of funding hasn't gone into entrepreneurs of color is because a lot of the fund managers that have access to this capital to invest in these founders have not been diverse, have not been from diverse networks. And so it is very important for people like PayPal and others to invest in Black and Latinx funds that will directly invest in founders of color. Chingona Ventures' mission is to get outsized returns with an outsized diverse portfolio. What we like to do is we like to allow founders that may not come from the traditional network, that may not come from a geography where there's a lot of access to capital, to come to us. Anybody can apply, and that process is the same whether it's a warm introduction or whether it's a cold inbound from the internet. PayPal's investment goes directly into these founders. As a matter of fact, last fall, when PayPal announced that they were investing in Chingona Ventures, as well as other fund managers, the very next day, we announced that we led a deal into Suma Wealth, which is a company for the Latino community, started by a Latina, where over 90% of the investors in the company were women, and over 80% were women of color. That's unheard of in the venture capital community. And so PayPal made capital commitments into fund managers. And then not only that, but a year later, they made another commitment to another set of fund managers. And so it's not just a one-time commitment. It's not just a one-time public statement, but it's actually making investments. And all that is what I believe is gonna help create structural change.
So little of venture funding goes to Black or underrepresented minority founders. And we felt we could make a big difference there. And we felt we could make a big difference in the communities as well by investing in community banks that are focused on underserved neighborhoods.
Hope was created to reduce the extent to which where one is born, their gender, their race, who their parents are, determine their ability to support their family, to contribute their economy. We work in communities that are among the most economically distressed in the country. And so we go into those communities and make sure that those families have affordable, responsible financial services to address their basic needs. And the PayPal deposit imports capital into these well-starved communities and gives them an opportunity to support their needs. Two strategies, more than any other, can be game changers in terms of closing the wealth gap. First is entrepreneurship. The other is home ownership. The primary asset on most families' balance sheet is their home.
I'm a law enforcement officer in Jackson, Mississippi. I've grown up in this area and I've seen the many struggles and opportunities that the area has and the challenges that they face. I wanted to become a homeowner so I can have some place to call my own. You know, after you work hard, you want to be a part of the community. So that was important to me. I have sons and I want them to have somewhere to come visit and feel comfortable. I've heard so many stories from friends that they were not able to qualify for loans and mortgages. I just don't think any other financial institution would have been able or was open to do the things that Hope Credit Union was able to do for me. And I just don't think without them I would be a homeowner at this time.
We are very excited about the ability that we have through relationships with PayPal and others to increase homeownership for people who are unfortunately often not able to get an affordable, responsible mortgage loan.
Closing the racial wealth gap, creating this foundation of financial health, both in Black communities and underrepresented minority communities, is essential for our economy and for the success of all of us and for the business community in general.
Making sure that the economy works for everyone is in our collective interest. That's what closing the racial wealth gap will accomplish.
I think we all need to step up. We have an obligation to help. You can't separate business from our communities. We rely on those communities. Those are our customers. They are what create a great economy over time. This is the right thing to do for our companies. It's the right thing to do for our communities, for our economy, honestly, for our country.